Welcome to this presentation on gamification. My name is Andres Gomez and I'm an instructional designer and educator technologist at EPFL. The objective of this video is to better understand the concept of gamification. For this, we will see some game mechanics and their possible implementation in a learning context. Gamification is relatively recent, but is gaining popularity whether it is in the world of research or business. But what is exactly gamification, and what comes to mind when you hear that word? Well, also think about that, but it's not only that. Caponetto and his colleague have a really good definition. So, the term gamification is used to designate the application of game mechanics in a non-game environment with three main objectives. The first is to increase commitment. The second is to improve the experience of participants and therefore to make the activity more attractive. I mean, not that kind of attractive, but I think you know what I mean. In other words, gamification is game mechanics or components in a non-game activity to get as close as possible as the feeling of a game. As you probably have understood, game mechanics is a really important part of gamification. But so then, what is game mechanics? So Toda identified 12 elements of game mechanics that we're gonna talk about during this video. However, we decided to group some of them together, like this. So, we're gonna talk about badge, leaderboard, points, instant feedback, progression, level and challenges, social status or social interaction, and narrative. Even though those elements are different in the literature, we regroup them because I think this is more an overview and it will just help you understand the main concepts. Let's start then with the badges. A badge like this one is won by the learner, and it represents the progress at a certain point or a certain stage in the learning process. According to Hamari, the badge provides some personal satisfaction and it's a form of recognition of the learning process. Hamari also finds that in addition to the learning objective, some learners set a goal of collecting all badges. Hamari also points out that badges and gamification intuitively add structure and purpose to the experience, as badges can encourage users to try different aspects of the service in a spirit of exploration. A little bit like this. So there's actually two really important elements here. As a content designer, the badge can also help you structure the learning, and it also will help the student to have a sense of exploration, maybe this sense of completion. Let's go now to the second mechanics, which is a leaderboard. So what is leaderboard? Leaderboard is the idea to rank your different students. So everybody is able to identify the position relative to other students and see where you are in terms of relation to the other students in your progress or in terms of points. So Toda warned us a little against the practice and highlight that leaderboard could lead to a loss of performance. And this was one of the most used mechanics in his literature review. One way to mitigate this loss of performance is actually to make the leaderboard anonymous. So every user could, for example, use a pseudonym, so he'll be able to recognize himself and see where he is compared to his comrades. However, he won't. It will be anonymized, so it will mitigate this social stress. So let's move to the third mechanics, which are points and instant feedback. As Na and her colleagues pointed out, they did a set of 15 studies and they tried to see which of the mechanics were the most used. And as you can see, points are elements that were into the most use as a mechanic, as a gaming mechanic. The reason is quite simple. This element is relatively easy to set up and constitute an experience similar to exam. So you can attribute points and increase the weight of elements that are important for the learning purpose, and that's something that generally teachers and facilitators are already used to do. So this is a really important and really easy way to set up gamification elements. And even though points per se represent immediate feedback, I will recommend adding some written feedback in case if you do some quiz. So if you have like a multiple choice quiz, you can just add another like a description of why it is the right answer or why it is the wrong answer, and generally that's will help the learner improve his or her mistakes. The next point will be progression. So usually progression is shown by a progress bar like this one. Progressions allows students to find himself in relation to the course and see his or her progression. So for example, in this case, the yellow student hasn't done much and has still a lot to do, but the red student is has quite complete the course. So this is a little bit similar to the badge that we talked before. It could lead to a need for completion. So in here we have regroup challenge and levels, and even though they're similar, they also have quite some difference. And I really invite you to take a look at the theory of the flow, because I think level and challenge goes beyond like gamification. So what is the main idea? The idea is to find the right skill level for the right difficulty level. So skills versus difficulty or challenge. Some studies, and especially machine learning studies, suggest that a 15% error is the right amount in terms of difficulty. So when a person do more than 15%, if you have a quiz and people do more than 15% wrong answers, it's probably mean that it is too difficult. If they do less, it's probably too easy. So one way to implement that is to make, for example, a small assessment of your students at the beginning of your course, and then you're gonna set up like a beginner, an intermediate, and advanced course. This is a way you can level up and try to find the right difficulty for your students. So when we survey people who follow an online course, usually they underline the lack of social interaction. This is a big challenge for online course, and there is no really an easy fix. But my recommendation is to use maybe some social media apps that could help mitigate this feeling. For example, you can have a WhatsApp group where you send regular information to your students, or a discussion forum where people come and ask their questions, and usually that helps alleviate this feeling that you're maybe alone behind a computer. So try as much as possible to use those social applications that can really bring a boost to your course. The last element we're gonna see, or the last game mechanics we're gonna see, treats with the idea of narration. So we won't talk too much about that. The only thing I want to say is that CAP suggests that a good storyline can help the learners achieve an ideal interest curve, where interest peaks around the beginning and end of the learning process, and to stay motivated through the learning process. So the idea here is to kind of tell a story when you teach, and try to make your students the hero of that story, and try to engage them through that story. So, in summary, I hope that you understand that you have those mechanics that you can implement in your learning: badge, leaderboard, points, and instant feedback, progression, level challenge, social status and social interaction, and narrative. And I hope that you understand that they have their pros and cons, and sometimes it's not easy to implement them, but there is also relatively easy ways to implement one or several of those, and I hope you have a better idea how you can do it, and the benefits and some inconvenience that this could bring for the students.